Hello and welcome to episode 98 of Fan Fuel Motorsports Podcast, the podcast where fans fuel talk about motorsports. Today, I am joined by Keith Merrick, and of course, that means with our new schedule, this is a pre-recorded episode. So, any and all comments are not going to be seen by us, but we would love to still have you in the comments talking with each other. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and welcome in my co-host, Keith Merrick. What's up, Keith?
Howdy.
How's it been going?
It's going, man. Got a couple of races under the belt since our last show, Martinsville and Talladega. But I know Dega is going to be the one that's mostly on the mind for this one.
Yeah. Colton and I had a pretty long episode the other night about Martinsville. We got into some stuff that was a little bit off topic when it comes to racing, but I think it was a good show. But I think we've got a good show lined up for ourselves tonight. We'll be joined by a couple of special guests here in a little bit as well. But before then, let's go ahead and get into Splash and Dash. So, like always, it's just a splash and dash of information from around the world of motorsports. The month of May started early this year with Indy 500 testing scheduled for Thursday and Friday. The 8.5-hour test saw top entry speeds of over 235 mile an hour into turn 3, down from 500 final practice last year, where Connor Daly hit the new trap speed record at 243.734 mile an hour, and Joseph Newgarden topping the chart at the end of Thursday at 227.686 miles an hour.
And Friday testing was canceled, but new aero changes seen in Texas that added 300 extra pounds of downforce showed promise in drafting practice, as all drivers were able to pass easier compared to what was seen in last year's Indy 500. Also, teams had the capability of running different floor, side pod, and rear wing aero that saw all high praise from drivers using different combinations of the three.
Yeah, so it was a pretty busy day of practice. They had the rookie test and everything as well, so you got to see some people doing the refresher laps and the rookie laps. So a lot was there to learn, but I mean, it's interesting to see that they added downforce, whereas we're always talking about taking away downforce, and all high praise from the drivers.
I mean, what I can surmise out of all of it, and we saw it at Texas has not been NASCAR's favorite racetrack for the last few years. Right. But as the track surface has aged, the IndyCar racing has gotten better at Texas since the repave in 2017. And it has a lot to do with being able to pass. So the extra added downforce, slows the cars down just a little bit, which you would think could be the opposite way around. But I think that just with how light these cars are, the added weight slows them down just a touch. But it makes for great passing. I mean, Texas was a phenomenal race. Yeah. Loved every bit of that race. And if we're going to see what we saw at Texas in Indy, we are most certainly in for a treat.
Yeah, and I mean, all I can say is since 2017 was the last year of the Aero Kit, Texas was the best oval race Indy's had. So that's saying a lot, and they really didn't do much in Texas for 300 pounds of downforce. I mean, when you're talking about open wheel cars, that seems like relatively nothing. So I'm excited to see what happens. What did you think about starting the month of May in the middle of April this year, compared to the last few years where we get week-long testing, then the NDGP, and then week-long testing for qualifying?
It's interesting. Definitely didn't feel normal because everybody's talking about, is it May yet? Is it May yet? And, it's definitely not May yet, but they had already started stuff in Indy, which I am not going to sit here and say I'm disappointed about. anytime we can put Indy cars at Indy, I'm all for it. So cool to see them come a little bit earlier this year. Love just having anything happening down in the capital.
Yeah, and I'm kind of disappointed they rained out Friday, because that would have been another 8.5, 9 hour day of just engine noise all day. So a little bit disappointed there. But from the fastest cars on the planet to the longest track on the NASCAR schedule, we're going to start with the Cup race this weekend. So I watched most of it. I don't usually have good things to say about speedway racing, so I'm just going to go ahead and pass it off to you so I don't have to say anything negative.
I listened to a good majority of it on the radio. I was out a lot of the day, but was able to watch the last 40 or so laps of the event. I thought it was enjoyable. I found it to be a little bit different than what we've had the last few plate races. I know we can't call them plate races anymore, but I'm going to call it a plate race anyway. They ended up getting that third lane moving a handful of times, especially at the end of the race. If you had a fast enough car leading that lane, you had enough horsepower up on the top, enough cars that went up there, they made a third line work. I think that air has a lot to do with it. Obviously, this is such an aero-dependent car. In an aero-dependent track, you put both of those together, it can be a little difficult to make things work. But yesterday, I found it quite enjoyable. Thought that the racing overall was some of the best we've seen with the next-gen plate package so far. And I hope that that continues to trend in the right direction. I know that we have, our things to say about how these cars operate, but I have nothing but faith that moving forward, we're going to see a pretty good product in the next couple of years, hopefully.
Yeah. If you guys recall from last week, I said that this was the best race that we've had at Martinsville since the next gen came out, and to not discount where we've come from and where we've gone. And then this week I'm watching the racing and I'm sitting here dogging on it the whole race, forgetting the words that I just said last Wednesday. Like, hey, see the progress that you've got on track. And when I look at this race compared to Atlanta and Daytona, and then all 6 of the races last year, it seemed like cars could actually make moves. Still nowhere near where we were at the latter part of the Gen 6 era, but it seemed like you could make moves. And like you said, we actually saw a third lane, which is obviously easier here than the other 2 super speedways. But I would say it was about as standard of a super speedway race as you could get. So it wasn't insane or batshit crazy, and it wasn't totally boring, but I would want more from what I saw Sunday. So for me, it's just a little bit better, but still not where we want to be, which, like you said, we have to keep the faith that that's going to happen. We saw 4 years of Gen 6 racing that were absolutely terrible at speedways, and then they came out with the greatest package we've ever seen on super speedways. So just want to slide a little ask for NASCAR to put those big ass spoilers on these cars and see what happens. But yeah, it was just a standard Talladega race for me. Nothing much really happened during their entire race on track until the very end. But we did have some interesting incidents on pit road. So when you look at Tyler Reddick's incident and Chase Briscoe's incident, where are you at on how those two happened and how they were dealt with from NASCAR and even other drivers' point of view?
So with the Reddick incident, felt like he was coming in with a little too much heat and kind of just screwed himself over getting down onto pit road. But I mean, he blasted the inside wall, hit the wall hard, spun around, on pit road. For any particular incident like that, that's almost an immediate caution. And for whatever reason, NASCAR didn't deem that cautionable. I don't understand exactly why. But then with the Chase Briscoe situation, he kind of just spun in front of the field and they threw out a caution for it. I understand that Briscoe ended up getting stuck on pit road. I'm not entirely sure because of what. I don't know if it was the diffuser or if it was a busted wheel, whatever the case may be. Um, but the Reddick incident certainly should have been a caution. I'm glad they threw out a caution for the Briscoe incident, considering he was kind of in harm's way, not being able to move. But in all fairness, that situation never would have happened had the Reddick caution been
Right.
called appropriately.
Yeah, that was my biggest takeaway from that whole green flag pit stop cycle is that the Chase Briscoe thing would not have happened had Reddick caused a caution when he came down. My other biggest takeaway was if we are anything but the next gen car, including the trucks and the Xfinity cars right now, that car's toast. I mean, he's done for. Obviously, the caution comes out because he's not going to be able to move at that point. But it is insane to me how massive of a hit that car took and just still went out and raced the rest of the race. That was my biggest takeaway from the whole thing. And also, with new brakes, how did both these drivers overcook going into the pit road?
It's easy. These drivers, they find themselves every single race, especially now. This is our third race at Talladega with this new car. This is our 8th plate race with this car. They're going to continue to push the limits. I think that they probably tested some of this out and figured out where they can kind of push their pit road entrance and see how far they can take it before they really have to hit the brakes. And you want to make sure you funnel all these cars down there. This is such a manufacturer-driven race anymore that, you stick, 8 Toyotas down onto pit road at the same time. You got to funnel down into 1 or 2 lines. So everybody wants to get that kind of advantage on one another. If Reddick's coming, 5 cars deep, trying to get up to the front of that line, you got to cook a little bit harder into pit road.
Yeah.
Bunch of Fords at the same time. Same thing in the Briscoe situation, just trying to push it to the absolute nth degree to make it work. The whole idea of a race is to get an advantage on everybody else. You got to be fast. You got to have more balls than the next person. You really need to just throw caution to the wind every once in a while and see what works. And that's some situations it works, and twice yesterday, unfortunately, it didn't.
Yeah, and I mean that's not something that we haven't seen the whole time we've been racing at these tracks, but it's just interesting to me with the bigger brakes and stuff, how you could get it wrong. And I know they said on the broadcast they thought that Tyler Reddick had too much rear brake bias, but that's something that I think you could also work on in the sim, or God forbid we ever had practice anymore. So I don't know. It was just kind of a unnecessary chain of events that happened, because had he not done that, we wouldn't be talking about the Briscoe caution, and had they actually thrown a caution for him, the Briscoe caution wouldn't have happened. And so for me, I don't know. We talked about last week, Colton and I, about how the wheel was sitting there on the exit of 4 at Martinsville, and that was kind of frustrating because I don't know if they saw it and they're just saying that we didn't see it, and they were doing like they did at Las Vegas that one time with the wheel out there. Just, we don't want to interrupt green flag pit stops, and that could have been something that had happened with the Reddick incident, honestly. So NASCAR's not on the forefront of my trust when it comes to green flag pit stop cycles and throwing cautions, but that is what it is. Let's talk about first the reaction of a move that happened. We'll get to a little later, and let's talk about the end of the race and Kyle Larson's car after his incident with the big one there at the end. I think Ryan Preece was the car that hit him. And I saw a lot of stuff on social, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, what have you. And there was a very distinct divided line of whether or not what we saw happen to that car was good or bad. So what side of that fence do you sit on with the passenger side basically breaking?
I'm in the middle. I'm glad that Kyle Larson and Ryan Preece got to walk away, but no car that ever gets on a racetrack should contort that way. We've come a very, very long way from where our stock cars used to be to where they are today. And we've seen some crazy shit. I watched the driver get hit in the head with a whole ass race car and walk away. I've never seen a door cave in like that. That hit was absolutely monumental. The whole roll bar on the 5 car was dug in at least a good foot or so. Brian Priest, he had the onboard camera of, the above the helmet shot, and his whole head went out to like here. And I know that the body's supposed to move when you get into an accident. If you stay in one spot, you're getting hurt. But the viciousness that I saw from Ryan Priest's onboard was jarring, to say the least. I'm glad that both of those guys walked away, but I also understand that NASCAR took the 5 and the 41 back to the R&D center,
Right.
to test on those cars and see what led to that. It was a wicked amount of force. Ryan Preece, he also sped up trying to avoid Kyle Larson, so the additional speed that Ryan Preece had didn't help anything. But nonetheless, that was a gnarly crash. I'm not a fan of seeing cars get torn up in that aspect.
So I kind of argued on the side of this was a good thing with some people, only because we see all this stuff over last year about how rigid this car is and whatnot. And when it comes to taking impacts, that it is not a good thing for the car itself not to move, because if it's not crumpling, whatever, that means all those forces are going into your soft spots inside your rib cage and stuff, breaking bones, throwing organs around, whatever. So at initial thought from me, I'm like, oh, okay, well, it broke, so that means that we had a lot of energy dissipated. But on the flip side of that, it hit the passenger side, right? So had it hit Kyle Larson on the driver's side, would we have seen the exact same thing happen? Or I think somebody in NASCAR said the driver's side is 10 times stronger. Well, what does that do in this impact? Does it cave in on him, or is it actually 10 times stronger and he gets hit with such a force that he just turns into liquid on the inside? So I don't know. That's a really scary crash. Like you said, I'm glad that they both walked away. But I guess with the very little information that we've gotten since this car's come out with safety, I don't know if it was a good thing or not. And I can see both sides of people saying, oh, yeah, well, it tore up. Okay, well, to me, that makes sense, because that's what we were talking about with the concussions and redoing the design of the rear end housing. But also the guys saying, we get hit like that on the driver's side, what happens? My second thing is, to a point you said, we've seen some gnarly crashes. Armchair guys on Twitter said that the impact speed was between 120 and 130 mile an hour. Have we seen someone T-boned like that? I guess since we've been watching. And do we know how the older cars would have reacted in that situation?
I mean, I can't think of a situation right off the top of the head. My heart wants to say that I have seen that at some point in time. I feel like we've watched way too many races over, a couple decades of time to not have seen an impact like that. The thing is a lot of these drivers, if they get hit on the driver's side like that, especially at 130 miles an hour, I can't imagine it feels very good.
Right.
And there have been quite a few situations, whether it be a T-bone, whether it be a single car incident, drivers will get out real slow. They'll have no breath. But the car will still be intact, at least where it is the most important, which is right on the cockpit. everywhere else should be shearing away. The hood should be shearing away. The front of the car, the rear of the car should be shearing away. Where the cage of the car is where it should be the most stable. They have all that foam on the inside of the car for a reason. They have all these different safety features in the car. But to see the passenger side, and I hope that, that 10 times stronger idea on the driver's side is a real thing, because if we see that kind of damage on the driver's side, Kyle Larson is not racing the rest of the year. Maybe not ever. That's how hard that incident was. And Kyle Larson, I can't imagine that he's much further than this from right on the door panel. I can't imagine that. So that's going to be a direct impact. And 130 miles an hour, I'm sure the metal that's protruding out of the passenger side is probably coming out even faster. Yeah. That would be a massive, massive blow.
Yeah. Well, to me, the only thing that I can think of is Michael Waltrip and Mike Harmon hitting the gate at Bristol. That's approximately 100 to 120 mile an hour incident. And obviously, both those cars sheared open and they got out with basically just the seat intact. That is the only thing that I could even think of when it came to similar incidents that we've seen here. Even though the projectile was coming at Kyle and he was the wall in this case, the car still behaved the same way. So I'm not sure what that means for whatever, but hopefully the R&D Center comes out and says, this is why this happened, this is what happened here, and this is what we're going to do to fix it. Because as soon as we had the Ryan Newman crash in 2003, we got the Newman bar. As soon as it happened again a couple of years ago in 2020, we got another Newman bar. So I'm assuming that they're going to take this seriously. Both of those cars are going to then be taken meticulously apart, and we'll have something better come out of it. Is back to my initial point, is the rigidity going to make this harder to, I guess, band-aid? But with all that being said, the reason that this crash happened was a last lap move for the win from Ryan Blaney, and basically Bubba Wallace going balls to the wall, making sure that he was going to win this race. So first, let's go over just the moves in general from, I guess, the start-finish line to the middle of turns 1 and 2 where this incident happened. Who are you putting on fault here? Because a lot of people, because it involves Bubba Wallace, are on both sides of the fence.
So I believe that this is Bubba Wallace's fault. And the reason why I say that, the 2009 Coke Zero 400. I can tell you right now, Tony Stewart did not turn Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch turned himself.
Yep.
So you're going for a race win. You're going to make the moves that are necessary. But you are also incurring all of the risk that comes along with those moves. The driver behind you, he is 100% within his rights to try and pass you. But you have to understand that whatever you do on the front of his nose is not his fault at all. So if you make a decision the leader basically is the one that controls everything. At Atlanta last year with Chase Elliott and Corey LaJoie, Chase Elliott was the guy that could either wreck himself or wreck the 7. The 7 wasn't going to do either of them. The 7 car has, he had the same level of responsibility to him, to his team, to his sponsors to try and go for a race win, as does Bubba Wallace. Now, Bubba went, I believe it was up, then down, and then back up. And then he's coming back up. Yeah. He gets hooked in the right rear, or hooks himself, whatever you want to call it, and he can't catch it. And he just takes out a bunch of cars. And, I'm not going to blame Bubba and say he's a bad driver for it, because I've seen some of the best drivers in the world do that. Kyle Busch, one of the greatest drivers of our generation, turned himself in front of an entire field at Daytona. It is a race-winning move, or possible race-winning move. You're not just going to stand idly by. And the only driver that I ever see do that would be Denny Hamlin. And that's only because of the fact that he is one of, if not the greatest plate racer that we've seen. in our generation solely due to the fact of how intelligent he is when it comes to plate racing. Not everybody has that same level of intelligence. So they have to do what they can to make things work. And so, is it Bubba's fault? Yes. Do I blame him for it? Absolutely not. He did everything he needed to do. And Michael Jordan said the same thing. I know Bubba's mom said the same thing. You're doing what you got to do to try to win. That's what you're here for. You're not here to finish second. You're here to win.
Yeah. Yeah. Obviously, there's a lot of hate because of Bubba being Bubba. And the worst part about this podcast when you're on is not being able to follow up with the perfect answer to the question. So I would like to echo everything that Keith just said. And I want to particularly point out one thing that really set it in stone as Bubba basically not only making it his fault, but he drove, in my opinion, over his head a little bit here. He went and put his left tires on the apron and bounced up. And that's when he decelerated just enough to be on the nose of the 12 car. And that's when he caused that whole chain reaction. Had he done like 100 IQ or 1,000 IQ play and just not gone down there and let the 12 take that run, there's a possibility he can still win that race because of where the line is at Talladega, past the tri-oval. I mean, we hear it every time that we watch the broadcast. There's no way these guys don't know it. I just feel like that in particular sets up the reason why it's 100% on Bubba. And anyone who says that Ryan Blaney is a trash driver and makes trash moves, congratulations, Cody, on graduating college finally, but you obviously don't have an education in racing. I mean, you can't not put that on him. I mean,
and the thing is the fact that there is also a level that some people may not take into account. And if you do want to blame Ryan Blaney, the dude hasn't won a real race since 2021. He has not won an actual race that wasn't a non-points paying event since Daytona of 2021 was the last time that he was in victory lane. This man's hungry. I mean, he's finished second more times than I can count in the last year and a half now.
Yeah.
He wants to win. You know, Bubba Wallace, he's won twice in that same span. And the rest of Ryan Blaney's teammates, there's a Daytona 500, there's a Cup Championship. Yep. There are a bunch of race victories that have been won, and Ryan Blaney's not on that list. He's got $1 million to show for it, but no points, no stats, no nothing that goes along with it. It's just bragging rights. And so I'm sure he's sick and tired of being called a fucking hack and saying that he can't win or that he's this era's Casey Kane or whatever the case may be. Like the dude deserves a shot to win a race. And while Bubba didn't make the right move, Ryan Blaney very easily could have just taken Bubba out if he wanted to.
And that's the first time that we've seen him aggressive since I can remember, because he's never been an aggressive driver. We always make fun of him for being the perfect teammate, and he goes out there and does that. So
I'm looking at it right now. He led 47 laps out of 196. He led the most laps in the event. He was not going to go down without a fight. You couldn't have envisioned that he was going to come into this event and not try and do whatever it was that he possibly could have done to win this race. I mean, he's led countless amounts of laps and nothing to show for it. And yet, even after getting into that whole incident, he still finishes second. He still finishes runner-up to somebody. And it's just like, when is it going to end? So, on one end, you could say Bubba Wallace won that wreck himself. That's the side that I find myself on. But at the other end, can you really blame Ryan Blaney for being that fucking hungry? Can you blame him for wanting to win that bad? Especially against somebody that's already proven they can win on plate races, i.e. Bubba Wallace. You got drivers. I'm looking at this field right now. Chris Buescher was right there. Eric Jones, Brad Keselowski. All of these drivers are plate race winners. And, well, except for Chris Buescher. But Chris Buescher's been one of the better drivers on the plate race in the last few years. You had all these drivers that are right on your ass. You got to make a move. He knew how to control the entire event. He knew how to control the lead. And he wanted to get back to that point, and I don't blame him for it. Do I think that it was on Bubba? Yes, but part of me can't sit here and say that Ryan Blaney wouldn't have done it anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And just because they're friends doesn't mean that you can sit here and say, "Well, oh, he should have cut him some slack or whatever."
Absolutely not.
That's
No
the
way.
thing. When it comes to Bubba Wallace, he's very polarizing, and because of that, he has the same sort of fan base that Chase Elliott does, and that is he can do no wrong, or he's totally wrong. There's no in between. So. I think when it comes down to people saying that it's Ryan Blaney's fault, it's just because they like Bubba and they're too, I guess, blind. They got their blinders on to having anything that Bubba could do.
It's
Wrong.
frustrating. It's frustrating to watch your favorite driver fall victim again. To not come home with a checkered flag again, and you want someone to put that blame on. And the guy that gets involved in the action off the front of your nose, that's the easiest one to blame. Easiest one to say did wrong. It sucks. It all around just sucks that both of these drivers had an incident like this, that neither one of them walk away with a checkered flag. It's great for Kyle Busch. I think it's awesome. But
Yeah,
it's just frustrating.
yeah. And speaking of Kyle Busch, he really did grill the field at Talladega, as the episode's name is, and he snuck in there at the end. My final point, basically, for the race itself was fuel strategy from the 8. Was this just a radio bluff, or was it just a lucky call? Because he chose not to go down pit road after being told to pit multiple times. Was this just an arrogant Kyle Busch getting lucky, or was this just a bluff on the radio from the pit box?
From what I can tell, this seems like miscommunication. I don't think that it was a radio bluff. You don't really see radio bluffs all that often, especially ones that work. The last one that I saw was Martin Truex back in 2018 at Sonoma, where he completely faked out the entire 4 pit crew. That was the last time that I can really remember that big of a bluff. I think it was just sheer miscommunication. Which, in all fairness, is completely lucky. That 8 car, when he finally won the race, he did one quick spin at the start finish line, and he was out. No fuel, thing was done. So he literally was on his last breath. So I think it was definitely miscommunication. But it was lucky as shit, man. I mean, it put him in a great position. Going back to the whole Bubba Wallace, Ryan Blaney accident, when Bubba wrecked and he hit the wall, or as he spun out and he's getting ready to, come back down, he was that close from hitting the right rear of Kyle Busch. And Kyle Busch could have had a devastating crash, which isn't talked about enough, because he very well could have gone headfirst into the wall at 150 miles an hour, and that would have been just devastating. But Kyle Busch and the 18, they snuck one out. Really, really, really cool to see him finally get back to victory lane in a plate track. It's been 15 years since he went to victory lane in a plate track. And to be completely honest with you, he should only have one plate race win, Talladega. The 2008 Daytona race should have been Carl Edwards, but we're going to get to that's a whole different conversation. But yeah, I think it's really, really cool for Kyle Busch. Dalton, if you're watching, happy for you. You got to see your boy win again, especially at Talladega. That's probably a euphoric feeling to watch your driver win at Talladega. Talladega is awesome. And to watch your driver win the lottery, essentially, has to be cool as shit, and especially for Kyle Busch. The guy's got, I think, a 62nd career race win. As cool as that is, to only win at Talladega twice, that's definitely a pretty big pat on the back for him. So that's awesome. Really, really cool. I think it's awesome for RCR. So finally back to victory lane at Talladega. It's been a really, really long time. I want to say Kevin Harvick in 2010. No, Clint Boyer in 2011. Yeah. But since then, I mean, it's been a pretty long hiatus after being such a dominant force at Talladega. So really cool for everybody a part of that team. But yeah, definitely some miscommunication led to a trophy.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, and it worked. maybe this kicks off a new resurgence for, I guess, plate races for the 3 and the 8 team. Just based on the fact that they did it. I mean, you break through that wall and you get that ball rolling. That's what happens. The the fact that he won here kind of makes me chuckle after what was it, 2020 or 2021, where he got out and said, "We'll go do something good on a real racetrack." So I'm wondering how Kyle feels about winning at Talladega now, whether or not it is a real racetrack.
I mean, I could tell you right now that Kyle Busch, he says some fuck shit and then does the exact same fuck shit. You know, he told Alex Bowman that he backed into a win at Las Vegas, and then his only win last year was because he backed into one.
Yeah.
So, you know, he always reaps what he sows. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah, well, I'm sure he's excited to go ahead and have 10 playoff points at this point in the season, and I think it moved him to second or third in the championship standings. I'm not quite sure. I'm not looking at the standings now, but I mean, he's quietly making himself a good playoff bid at this point, and I do say quietly because it's been quite some time since race 2 of the championship, and this was quite kind of a quiet win with all the drama around the final lap happening.
Absolutely. And sometimes that's just the best way to keep it, you know, like you let everybody else take the fall for it and you go find yourself winning a race. And, you know, this is the first time since 2019 that Kyle Busch has won multiple races before the All-Star break. So
Right.
It's been a while since we've seen him in this form, you know, whether it be because of a plate race or not, you know, a win is a win. And Kyle Busch also very quietly in the top 5 in points right now. That was 5th top 10, 3rd top 5 of the year. He's looking pretty solid. I know that it's early on in the year, but it's really refreshing to see him running in a form that I think all of us remember Kyle Busch.
Yeah, and then I'm kind of looking at it like last year, Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott. They never really made too much noise, but they wound up with 30 and 40 plus points going into the playoffs for bonus points. So we could see something like that from Kyle. Where he sneaks a couple more wins in, and all of a sudden we start round 1 of the playoffs, and he's second in points. So we'll see how the future holds for the summer races coming up, and we'll see what happens after the All-Star break. But other than that, let's talk a bit more. I know we did at the beginning of the show. What about the fan backlash on super speedway racing? I haven't seen this much hate week after week after week on Twitter in quite some time when it comes to stuff. And considering where we were this time last year with the praises of the next gen car, do you think this is just a hate bandwagon that is brewing, or what is actually going on? Because you know, I didn't find Martinsville to be too much different than any Martinsville race we've ever seen. And then you basically said that we saw a lot of improvement with the super speedway package. So are we just on a hate train right now with this next gen car, or are we actually seeing worse racing?
Larry Mack came up with something really good years ago, and it's cautions breed cautions. And I'm going to echo it and say hate breeds hate. When one person says, I don't like this, and someone's like, you know, I don't like it either, everybody jumps on that. Everybody finds anything to nitpick about. If you get 10 people to nitpick something, they'll find 10 different things to nitpick about. And that's just how it is. NASCAR, they do some stupid shit, but unfortunately with this fan base that they have right now, they're never going to win 100%. They might win 90, they might win 80, but they will never win 100%. And I think that they should take their wins when they can find them. They really should not be looking too much on social media and just focus on getting the car better. I'm sure that they know what they had with the Gen 6 car, especially at the latter portion of its run in 2020, 2021. You know, 21, I feel like they finally just notched it perfectly. And at that point, you know, they had to go and find themselves in a position where they had to catch lightning in a bottle over again, which is exactly what we ended up having with the next gen car last season. You know, so everybody looks at the next gen car and says, wow, we really came a long way. You know, glad that we could do X, Y, and Z after such a great year in 2021. I feel like the bar was set high in 21. They extended the bar in 22. And now we're about where the bar was in about like 2015, which
Okay.
isn't terrible, but it's
It's not
also
good
not
either.
it's not great. It's not
Let's be
21, it's not
honest.
22. This is 2 years back to back of great racing, great storylines, chaos, calamity, you name it, these guys had it. And now we come into 2023 and it's a normal season. It's a
Yeah.
normal Cup Series season, and I don't think anybody's been used to a normal season. 2019 was the last normal year. 2020 pandemic, 2021, Kyle Larson returns, final year of the Gen 6 car, 2022 next gen, 18 different winners, you name it. These last 3 seasons were full of stories and chaos, and now you have a normal year and no one knows what to do with it. And like, I want the excitement back. Cool. Wait. Just keep watching.
Yeah.
Like it's gonna happen. The Gen 6 car did not become perfect overnight. We watched some really shitty seasons. We watched some awful years. 2019, as normal as it was fucking garbage. And like this is better than 2019. This is normal. Like you're gonna have races where the Hendrick drivers run away with it. You're gonna have races where not everybody can pass each other perfectly. But at the same time, you also have races that are exciting and fun. Auto Club was awesome. Coda was awesome. Talladega was a decent Talladega race. I think our bar is just up here right now.
Yeah.
And everybody needs to understand that was extreme circumstances. We're at like a normal level right now. And that is perfectly fine.
If anything, I still think we're better than all the COVID years and 2015 to 2019 because we've gotten a bunch of green flag pit stops in races that we didn't since the stage era started. We've had tire fall off at tracks that we haven't had since 2020. We've had pretty great intermediate racing, and people who didn't like Las Vegas and Auto Club, I think, need to be shot because I mean, they were still passing all the way through the field, but they were just bored because some dude was out leading 12 seconds. And if your metric for a race is whether or not there's a guy on somebody's ass the whole time, you're going to be disappointed week in and week out because that's not possible in any racing series that I've ever seen. So even sprint car races, you've got guys that are a half a lap ahead of second place on a 35-lap main event. So I don't know. I'm with you. The bar is a little bit too high right now. I'm enjoying this season. Like you said, it seems a little bit more routine, which routine can get boring when you've had such stellar stuff happen in the recent past. But that's why we need to hold on to those things and be like, wow, we're watching excellence right now and just not be like, oh good, we're gonna get this every week because
and the thing is like I really hope that NASCAR sees some of this shit and understands that normal's okay and doesn't try to do some grandiose ass shit.
Well, that's why we're where we're at with the point system and the staging at races and the 550 package that came over to what we have with the next gen car. It is okay to have fun with what we are playing with. You don't have to have shiny new best explosions every single week because when you do that, it undermines that you have shiny new explosions every week.
Yes.
And the Game 7 moment that is the Championship 4 is the proof in the pudding for that statement. But with that being said, I think Cup Sunday is done, and it's time to bring in our special guests. I see one of them in the background, but that's going to be my parents, both of them. As you know, my dad started a company over the last couple of months, and together with my mom, who did most of the legal stuff because she's way smarter than him in that department. They were sponsors this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway on the 51 of Jeremy Clements. You can see their logo, Matman Designs, in the quarter panel area right in front of the All-Ants sponsorship there, and they're on both sides of the car. And so, congratulations, guys! You are sponsors. How cool is that? And Dad, your mic is muted.
You're on mute.
Yeah, I was trying not to say too much right there when you said your mom was smarter than I am, but she really is. She's twice as smarter than I am.
Maybe just a little bit.
But, Alex, as I've been going to the races for quite a while, it feels like I get the kind of sponsorship treatment because of being a supplier to these teams quite often. But your mom actually finally got to experience what it was really like as a sponsor to be on the side of the car, taking time. We were walking toward the grid just for qualifying, and Jeremy's running a little bit late, and he stops and talks to us for 15 minutes, and then he realized what time it was, and he says, "Oh, crap, I think I might need to go get my fire suit on and go qualify." But he took the time just because he saw us walking. You can't say that about all drivers for that.
No, I think that's a Jeremy Clements thing for sure, because I think he's just genuinely a nice guy. So I think if he knew you and you saw you, he would stop to talk to you. I don't think you have to be a sponsor for that.
All right. Well, let's get on to the racing then. So you guys got to see everything firsthand. Keith and I just had to watch it on TV. So first and foremost, I'll start with you guys on just an overall generalization about how Saturday's race went. What did you guys think of the action?
Go ahead, Mom.
Huh?
Go ahead.
I mean, overall, most of the race was pretty good. The wreck, the big wreck with Perkins in it, holy cow, that was a little nuts. That was kind of brought me back to old Talladega days where you see the big one. And then of course I was a little bit disappointed at the end of the race with that last wreck. But I mean it was actually pretty good racing all day. I really enjoyed watching it. Watching it from pit road is a completely different perspective. Actually got to get up on the pit box. That's really cool. You just see a lot of how those guys, what the work that the crew puts into it, the emotion they have in it. It was a really great race to watch, honestly. Just disappointing at the end for me.
We got to also see, and I don't know if your mom paid as close of attention to the other stuff like the tires coming off and then weighing the fuel can and to make sure they had enough fuel at different points in time. But your mom and I were privy to the headsets that the sponsors get to have on their head. So you're basically listening to the spotter and Jeremy and the crew chief and the crews talk back and forth to everybody, and I would have to say Jeremy's spotter this year is probably on a different level because this man is driving Jeremy 3 and 4 car lengths ahead of him and letting him know 3 and 5 cars behind him what's coming. I think that was a little bit different than in years past where he might have had a split second to make that choice, but his spotter's giving him a lot more time on the super speedways to know what's coming or where he thinks the energy is in front of him and trying to get him to move into the middle lane or the top lane to move forward well before the top lane actually has all the momentum. And that is something really cool to listen to versus what you might have heard as a spotter on Saturday saying you got to get down and block or whatever on Sunday,
All right. Well, Keith, I know you got to see a little bit more of the race than I did. So what did you think about overall the Xfinity race on Saturday?
I mean, I can't complain. I love the Xfinity Series. How that series has operated the last few years has been fantastic. Thought it was refreshing not to watch an Austin Hill domination race again. It was nice to see multiple drivers lead laps. It was great to have that parity pretty much all day long. And especially towards the end, you had two unsuspecting Ford Mustangs at the front of the field, in Brett Moffitt and Ryan Sieg, which is really cool to see both of those teams highlighted up at the front of the field for the day. But overall, thought it was a great race. I can never complain about an Xfinity Series race unless it's poorly officiated. I think it's just a fantastic race all the way around. So definitely an A in my book.
Yeah,
Keith, you would be on Steve Karn's bandwagon. The Xfinity package is much greater and better than the Cup package, correct?
Oh, for sure. I mean, as much as I hate to say it, the Xfinity Series it mirrors that of what the COT used to be in the latter stages of its run in 11 and 12. So it's nice to know that a part of that portion of our sport is still alive and doing very, very well.
Yeah. It is interesting. I've been very vocal on the podcast to say about how the Xfinity Series has been lacking as far as super speedways goes. Out of the three, I've always thought that it's been really the worst of the three when it comes to the packages. Obviously, with the next gen, that's kind of warping a little bit. But seeing as many passes as you did at Talladega made me really appreciate how wide that track is, because even looking back to Daytona and Atlanta this year with the Xfinity Series, we still didn't see good racing. So there's just something magical about Talladega that gets all these races to look a little bit better. But I will say this is the most chaotic plate race in the Xfinity Series I think we've seen in the last 5 or so years. We've not seen this much carnage in a while.
And I do think that has something to do with them only going to Talladega once this year. So they were a little more active, and that's a good thing for the fans and the TV because of the extra aggressiveness in certain times. Yeah. But we can say this, and I know your mom is kind of happy that, we've got customers throughout the garage, and one of our other customers actually pulled off the win for the weekend for Xfinity because Jordan Anderson is a customer. So, we left happy anyway.
Yeah. So, so moving on to the next point. You said this before we got on the show, Keith, so I'll let you lead off with it. But basically, Junior Motorsports collapsed once again. So what do you feel about the incident that seems to happen almost every race in 2023 with these guys?
Trying to look past the fandom bias of it, it is quite frustrating to watch all these guys have such a hard time week to week, whether it be stepping on their own foot or stepping on each other's feet. It's been a very frustrating season overall when you look at all of the drivers. Brandon Jones comes over, not really making a lot of noise. Sam Mayer, he's been all right. Justin Allgaier, Josh Berry, they've been running pretty solid for the most part. But everybody just has had a rough go at it to start off the season. And then when you look at the Xfinity Series for yesterday or Saturday for that matter, all three of them took each other out. I want to say Sam Mayer, what happened was Ryan Truex, he kind of blocked Sam Mayer's run. Sam Mayer hopped off the throttle. Josh Berry bounced into Sam Mayer, and Mayer took everybody out. Took out Allgaier, took out Berry, took out himself. Brandon Jones was not involved in that, but he had an earlier issue that kind of mired him back in the field for a lot of the day, and he wound up with a 14th place finish after all the chaos happened. But Junior Motorsports just cannot get out of their own way at all this season. And these are drivers that 3 of the 4 cars ended up in the Final Four last season, and none of them look to even be equipped to run in the Final Four as we're running through this season right now, which is kind of a head scratcher because they have been such a dominant force. And maybe it's just, a situation in which, it's new season, new driver comes in, things are just moving around, a lot of different moving parts. But this no longer feels like the early season gremlins. It feels like this is what we're going to see all year long, unless they have a real stout talk and figure something out to get things moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I don't know that you could say this is new teams shifting over 8 weeks into the season. So let's see what the guys on the ground had to say about it.
Well, knowing that what I spoke with Sam Mayer, he said Brandon's a really, really nice guy, and it seems like sometimes he's not as aggressive, and it comes back to bite him from time to time. And Sam said he's not trying to bite him. It's just sometimes that you're in the wrong situation with the guys. And we've got 4 guys that are going out to win every week. There is no team this, team that. It's 4 separate teams under the same roof that are out there to win. And that could be our own detriment. So if you think about it that way, they don't think of the 1, the 8, the 9 as being right there as I've got to follow him.
So they're not taking advantage of the teamwork aspect of it and working together early on in the race to make sure they're still in it at the end of the race, then compete closer to the end of the race, right? I mean, that seems like something I would do if I was, had that many cars on my team, right? I'd be pushing for all the guys to kind of work together for majority of the race and then duke it out in the last few laps to see who wins, right? Yeah. Instead of trying to be so aggressive throughout the race with each other, right?
I mean, the way that it worked out at Daytona earlier this year, all 4 of the cars were lined up 2nd through 5th behind Austin Hill, and they were in prime position to make a move and just fight between them 4 for the win. And little by little, they eliminated each other. They wrecked. Brandon Jones got wrecked. Sam Mayer got turned over.
Oh,
oops.
Lost Keith.
But I understand what Keith was saying. It's just
right.
They had the perfect scenario at that one point in time to where they were all working together, and one by one, whether it was their own doing or somebody else's, they eliminated themselves.
Yeah. My question is why, though? I mean, you got 4 guys that don't really have big personalities that seem to be guys who would be very good teammates. How do they keep having these problems? Like, what is the reason that they're stepping on each other's toes? Like,
Alex, just go to me and you, for instance. Think of me and you. If me and you were teammates, knowing how competitive we are, me and you're only going to work together for so long. You're only going to follow me for so long. I'm only going to follow you for so long. First chance I get, I'm dumping you if it's coming back to the checker, right?
But if I'm the car owner and I'm like the head of the team, I'm going to tell you both that you need to work your butts together until those last few laps, and then you guys can duke it out. I mean,
and then me and you're going to be in the principal's office afterwards.
Say what?
Yeah.
And then we're going to be in the principal's office afterwards.
Yeah, but the biggest thing is these guys aren't aggressive. None of them. Justin Allgaier, definitely not an aggressive driver. Brandon Jones, he's been aggressive twice in his life. Sam Mayer's the most aggressive out of the bunch. Josh Berry's not. He's more calculated than anyone on track. How can they be in each other's way so much? How can they have such bad luck by themselves so much? I don't get it. I don't know what kind of bad luck is looming over the Junior Motorsports shop, but it's obviously not working out for them.
Is it a chemistry thing?
I don't know.
I mean,
like maybe it's not that they're bad guys. They just, like basketball players and stuff, or football players, you can see people on your team and just from working with them that they're going to go left or right or whatever. Maybe these drivers, they're good drivers individually. They're great guys, whatever, but they just don't have that chemistry to go, okay, I know he's going to go up and, or he's going to go down. So I need to follow him. So maybe they just don't have that kind of chemistry to kind of know what the other one's thinking and follow them, right?
I mean, another big thing is last season, they had just a catastrophic failure. They had a 75% chance to win the Xfinity Series title, and they fumbled the ball entirely to just one singular car in Ty Gibbs, and I can't imagine that the chemistry is all that great after that.
Right.
It's definitely a frustrating situation, and it feels like it's carried over into this season. It seemed like they were all right at Daytona, had each other's backs, and then once push got to shove, they got a little too aggressive and just ditched the whole team idea.
Yeah.
Well, is there anybody that will at that location in leadership that will sit down like Rick Hendrick will and make shake-up changes? Or like Richard Childress has in the past and make big-time shake-up changes to change the mindset of the entire team as well as the driver for the team to where it puts a better focus back into each team individually?
I'm not sure. I mean, Dale Jr. is probably not the one to do that. I think Kelly would be the one to do that, but I don't know if they're to their wits' end yet with all these crash race cars. I don't know how they couldn't be, but
Yeah, that's
it
money.
is what it is. We'll have to see what happens going on the rest of the season. But speaking about crash race cars, Daniel Hemrick, he basically took the whole field out and flipped himself coming out of turn 4. What did you guys see from pit road? Because obviously this would have been the only wreck that you could actually physically see, depending on where you guys were sat.
Technically, where we were sitting, we didn't see anything, but Joey Gase, who was pitted right before Jeremy, and Austin Hill, who was pitted right in front of Jeremy, they both come in with damage, and Joey Gase come in on fire. So all we really saw was a bunch of fire extinguisher smoke.
Oh my God, it was horrible.
Unfortunately, but it was one of those moments of you hear Jeremy on the radio saying that, man, we almost had it. We got hit from behind. At that point in time, who would have been the strongest cars that would have missed at that point by not doing whatever? But I mean, it was like you said earlier. It was that me and you were sitting in the stands freezing at Talladega that one October, or was it April? Either way, but it was that nasty wreck that Stewart caused, and it sort of looked like that on the replays, and we had 2 big replay screens that we could look at from where we were, and to me it looked like that, and the next thing you know, you just started seeing cars stack on top of other cars in the corner and then start rolling down.
Yeah.
What did you see from that incident, Keith?
I mean, I could tell the intensity was starting to ramp up. The eventual race winner, Jeb Burton, he was making some moves that I was not fond of at all. He was doing a little too much, trying to block everybody. The whole damn field he was trying to, put behind him. And I understand trying to win, but he was doing some early Ricky Stenhouse Jr. moves. And I can tell you right now, it didn't look all that great. But everybody's intensity started ramping up. Hemrick, he got himself too high up in 3 and 4. And tried to jump back down in front of Sheldon Creed, and he dumped himself, which it sucks. But, when you're put in a position where you're trying to fend for yourself and trying to hold everybody back, it's not easy. And these cars are nothing like the Cup cars. They move around a lot more freely than the Cup cars do. And it's easier to get runs than what you have in the Cup Series. So those runs come quick. And unfortunately, Daniel just put himself in a very compromisable position and found himself upside down pretty quick.
Yeah. Well, I guess my next question to you in specifics would be Daniel Hemrick won the championship in his only career win at that point at Gibbs, and he's gone over to College Racing. He hasn't really done much there either. How long do you think he gets to continue to make these mistakes? Because he's not just making mistakes here. He's making mistakes at road courses. He's making mistakes at intermediates. How long do you think Matt Collard pays the bill for him?
I can't imagine it's going to be for much longer. I really don't. Looking at what he's done this season, he's only got 2 DNFs, and they are both at Daytona and Talladega. And he's run some pretty solid events. The only finish he's had outside of the top 10, outside of his 2 accidents, was at Richmond, where he finished 24th. Everything else he's finished in the top 10 for. He's got a second place finish at Atlanta. You know, the guy knows how to race, and that's the frustrating part, is the fact that he knows what he's doing. You know, I'm not too fond of the fact that he's only got one career NASCAR race victory, and that was it. You know, that championship win that he had was the only race win he's had in any NASCAR sanctioned event. So it's been a little bit of a daunting task. You know, when you look at last season, you know, he finally started to turn some things around at the very, very end of the year. But outside of that, there were so many finishes outside of the top 20, outside of the top 30, just not having good runs. I think this year has a very big jump from what we saw last season, and I hope that he can keep that up. I don't think that Chris Rice or Matt Collig will be disappointed with Daniel Hemrick not trying to win a race. I think they want to have a driver that goes and tries to win as much as they possibly can. And if you wreck trying, at least you tried. But I think what is helping Daniel Hemrick is the fact that he's putting more consistent finishes together. He's putting together solid race runs. If he keeps this up, I don't see a reason that Matt Collig and Chris Rice move on to another driver just yet. I give it until the end of this year to see if they really want to, look at the other options. Because he can race, he can win. He is a competitive driver, but there comes a point where you need somebody that's not just competitive. You need somebody that's going to deliver.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, moving on to our next point, because I know that Keith's got to get off so he can go to work. Let's move on to the other flip of the day, and that was the Blaine Perkins crash. Now, you guys told us that you had a story to tell with that, so I'm just going to let you two have the floor.
Okay, well, after the race, I'm sitting in the holler with Jeremy, and Jeremy says, and we've been done discuss stuff for about 10, 12 minutes. Your mom's out there making friends with all these other folks out behind the hauler at the moment. And I come out and say, you want to go grab a bite to eat instead of going to the dirt track? And she said, do what? And so we followed Jeremy and his wife, Courtney, over to where 3 of his other sponsors have set up RV camp. And we're on the super stretch and everything. And then we get there, and Scott Ward, One Stop sponsor that's on the hood, they asked him about the Blaine Perkins crash, and they were actually still working on where the 66 crashed into the inside wall to fix a safer barrier.
Oh, yeah.
And Scott got a little animated and was telling everybody how high that car came up. And then one of the other sponsors, Jimmy, he come up and he said it was quite the spectacular part because parts of the car were above the top of the fence, equal to where their line of eyesight was.
So
that's how
basically
high
the car got like really, really high. It looks like it got high, but like from them for them to have seen it at like eye level where the parking is, like that's over the fence.
Oh,
so
no.
Yeah. He really thought that there was going to be parts coming through or car or something and like hit him. He was glad to know that it really didn't start flipping or breaking apart until farther down the stretch. So he said he's pretty sure some people on down the road probably had a little shrapnel, but fortunately they did not. But he was like he was certain. He said, I turned around, I was certain there was going to be some parts flying through the fence as high as it got up. And he said it was a horrible wreck.
And it was at its peak right in front of where their RVs were parked.
Mm-hmm.
Which was real close to where me and you sat in April of 2011 for the tandem event.
Okay. Well, that's kind of scary. It looked really scary on replay and on TV. that car basically disintegrated like we fully expect it to when it gets that high, and we saw a tire bouncing down the back straightaway, which was comical looking back at it now. But for Keith, this is not the first really big crash that we've had in our back straightaway, particularly in the Xfinity series. You know, you saw the Jordan Anderson car of Myatt Snyder last year, or maybe it was the year before at Daytona. We've seen Chase Elliott right through there, Kyle Larson right through there on the super stretch. Is there any, or Matt Crafton as well for that matter, is there anything that you think needs to be done? Hearing about these guys that are on the outside of the track in the RV saying that it looked like they went over the fence, or is this just something that we're just going to have to deal with, being that it's plate racing?
The biggest thing you can do is you slow the cars down anymore, it's going to ruin the racing product further. You don't want to do that. Slowing the cars down can only work so much. These flips, they're going to happen. You're in the draft, you're moving around, the air is so turbulent and so strong, there really is no way to 100% avoid this kind of thing. You know, yeah, this was, one of those blowovers in which, the O2 of Blaine Perkins got tagged and the car went up and the air caught under it. But there have been situations in which we've seen cars, Chris Buescher last year, he hit a drain at Charlotte Motor Speedway and flipped over. So you're not going to avoid the flipping aspect. However, you can bolster up the cars. And as much as I love to see the cars pull apart and dissipate all that energy, it needs to be a little more together. They've done a lot in the last couple decades, tethering down the hood, tethering down the roof flaps, tethering down the trunk, making sure that those parts are intact. But as far as everything else is concerned, they need everything tethered to that car as best as they possibly can. I know it's a little difficult with the composite body and everything. Everything is literally pieced together. But that's really the only piece of advice that I can really offer up. You got to have these cars dissipate energy, especially when they're flipping around. Even still after dissipating all the energy, Blaine Perkins was still in the hospital, which thankfully did get released safely, which is great. But flipping is always going to be a part of motorsports, no matter where you're at. It's always going to be there. But how we build these race cars and how we move forward as a whole in terms of how we're designing these cars and making sure everybody is as safe as possible, whether it be the drivers, whether it be crew members, whether it be fans, that's always going to be the utmost amount of importance.
Alex, you've also got to think it's not really the speed. Look at a dirt late model, look at a sprint car, look at a non-wing sprint car. It doesn't matter what vehicle you're in, depending on the situation, you can flip. It's just how violently is it going to flip and where the abrupt stop is to where you get hurt. The composite bodies that the Xfinity cars have now actually dissipate the energy a little bit quicker because they are not sheet metal. They break up and break apart to come apart on purpose. So I don't know that any part of whatever we do racing wise will ever not see flips anymore compared to what lack of flips we used to see in the 80s.
Well, I mean, the difference between those two time periods is definitely the spacing between the cars. So that in general comes down to whether or not you want pack racing or not, because with pack racing, you're going to get wrecks. And with wrecks, you're going to get flips. That's basically what it comes down to, because when you're talking about 80s and before, you're single car most of the time, just because they're not pack racing. But I do want to ask my mom a question, because she got some really wide eyes when you guys were telling that story about how it was going over the fence and stuff. When I was a kid, I can't remember how old I was, but we were at Rome Speedway. We were at Rome Speedway, and a car came up into the catch fence and threw a bunch of rocks. And mud clots, through the fence and whatever. And I was right there.
Some
You
shrapnel.
and my sister were running away from the fence, and I was just like a big dummy, like, oh, watching it happen because whatever. But as a mother and soon to be grandmother, when you're looking at this kind of stuff, does it kind of scare you a little bit, or is it something that you're like, well, you know what you sign up for when you go to a racetrack as a spectator?
Yes and yes. I think a little bit of both. I think you have to. I think you've got to be aware when you go as a fan, and you are close to these cars, especially closer to the fence line, be it NASCAR, be it at a dirt track or just a smaller asphalt track or whatever. I back at the time you were talking about in Rome, really didn't think about it. Should have known, but I see this car flipping up and like shrapnel coming off of it, and I grab you and your sister and turn around, and it's just pinging me in the back. Y'all were in front of me, and my back is to the racetrack. I mean, thankfully nothing happened to us then, but it's an aspect of racing. It can be dangerous. I mean, a tire can come up in the stands. You don't know. So, yeah, Saturday's wreck, I kind of had a little moment of, oh, I remember what that was like being that close to the fence and seeing that happen, as a mom. But just as a general spectator, you have to know what you're signing up for. You can get hurt. You need to pay attention. You need to understand where you're at, and you need to be watching the track. If there is a wreck, you need to be ready to move if there's any way possible to get out of the way. I mean, it's something that happens. Unfortunately, nobody is not doesn't mean for it to happen. It's unfortunately a part of racing that there's wrecks because the cars break apart to take that impact off the driver as they should for their safety. That means parts and things are going to be flying, and it could very well be coming toward us as fans. So, yeah, I mean, you got to know what you're signing up for and be prepared to deal with it.
Yeah, that's
that's all. You got to remember too that when I tell your mom when you were a kid, I want to take them to Talladega or I want to take them to Atlanta, and she says, well, I don't care how much extra money it spends, y'all are not getting this close. You will take my kids to the tower at Talladega, or you will take my kids further down the front straightaway at Atlanta. And the maddest she got was when you said you wanted tickets at Atlanta Motor Speedway in the restart zone while they're coming right out of 4 and bouncing off the wall. That was I hate to say it, but I got in trouble for that seat. But if you know where you're going to be sitting and knowing where the danger may lie a little more than other places where maybe a casual race fan does not, some of these things could be educated a lot more for some of these fans, and some of the tracks could potentially put up different places to where there are no seats because, centrifugal force, everything's going to go the same way the car was going anyway, right? So if it's going and it's got to go in around the corner, it's going to go outwards of that corner. Or if it's going straight and it starts to disintegrate, but yet it's making a turn, it's still going that way. So, you don't want to sit at that other dog leg at Atlanta, and you don't want to sit before the flag stand. But this is too why your mom don't like me on the flag stand quite as much, because the cars and everything come straight at me coming off of turn 4.
Yeah, well, it's
and
not
that's
like
why you don't
haven't been hit with shit anymore.
And that's also why you don't put the back. Huh?
Did you not get hit this weekend?
No, I got hit last weekend. Not
was it
this
last
weekend.
It was last weekend.
No, but I did get the flag Brandon Overton's win in the third feature at the World of Outlaws on Friday night at Talladega Short Track. And I give Kyle Bronson the double checkers in Heat 2. Well, feature number 2. So it was kind of good. Your mom said, now I remember why I don't like dirt tracks. She come up there to watch, she snuck up there to watch so she could see me flag the feature. And within the first 5 laps, we had a caution. She was gone. It was too dirty. She said, I like that asphalt stuff a lot better.
Well, y'all can come visit anytime. All I got around me is asphalt tracks.
Hey, we're coming up there because one of the sponsors lives up there.
Okay.
You know, the one-stop guy I told you about, he lives in Greenwood. He said, next time we come visit y'all, bring y'all, we'll have a party. So we're going to have a party.
It will be a party.
All right. Okay.
Yep. Clothes and all.
Right. Well, all right. Well, before we close out, we do have one more thing to talk about, and that is the eventual winner of the race. And of course, I'll let my dad say what he wants to say in regards to car owner Jordan Anderson. But first, Keith, you alluded to not liking what Jeb Burton was doing. Do you have some disdain with that driver, or what was going on?
I'm cool with Jeb Burton. Jeb Burton's a cool dude. He's busted his ass trying to get to where he's at right now. He's jumped from ride to ride. Hasn't had the best luck. And he got a great run with Kaulig a couple years ago and won at Talladega. But when I see drivers making moves that I'm not the biggest fan of, I don't want to see them benefit from it.
Okay.
One big thing I remember back in the 2014 summer Daytona race, Stenhouse making a bunch of crazy moves. It was on a Sunday afternoon, and a whole bunch of crazy moves and wrecks the field. Tony Stewart gets out, and he says, this kid's over here trying to be a hero. And it's just, I know you're going for a race win, but you have a lot more on the line than you think. And one bad move could have very easily taken him out of contention, could have wrecked a whole bunch of cars. And we saw it with Bubba Wallace. And the thing is if Jeb Burton does it on the last lap, whatever, you're going for the race win, but you still got 15, 20 laps to go, and you're making moves like that. You're putting everybody else at risk, and you're not even in a position to win the race yet. You're just trying to get to that point. So moves that compromise other drivers and other teams, I'm not always the biggest fan of. If it's last lap, all bets are off. I can't be mad about it. But just wasn't the biggest fan of the moves. I've since calmed down since the race ended. But definitely cool to see Jeb Burton walk away with the race win, regardless of what he does. It's something that I will never understand as a race fan. I don't pay bills trying to run a race car. I'm not the guy trying to keep my job. So whatever you got to do is what you got to do. I can be frustrated all I want, but I'm sitting on a chair on a fucking podcast, and that guy's got a badass Talladega trophy. So who's a real winner?
Got two of them now.
You got a point.
All right, so no, I will say this: the Jeb Burton winning. Obviously, you listen to the Dirty Mo series about Jeb and Harrison, and you kind of rooting for them because of Ward and Jeff for both the Burton boys that are out in Cup and Xfinity now. I think my dad and I, we always had, for lack of a better term, kind of a hard-on for Jeb Burton when he was coming up through the truck series because he was so damn good in that Longhorn car. And he just waxed the field at Texas. I remember that one day. And we were like, yeah, this kid's going to be the next thing, and he just never has. So for me, seeing him win, A-OK, let's get him a full season ride as many years as we can in the future. Let's see him run for Xfinity titles. Maybe swap him with Harrison because Harrison's not working out in that 21 car in Cup. But it was really good. But when it comes to really, I guess, Matt Man designs in general, the first breakout guy for you was Jordan Anderson.
Technically, it was Jordan Anderson in the February, and then we got hooked up with Jeremy in April. So Jeremy, who was one of my flagship guys because I've known him since 2003 in Dirt Lake Models, but Jordan's been ordering mats from me since before then. So it was kind of cool to have Jordan just keep continuing to buy mats from us, even though Alsco, who is a uniform and mat company, he took all of that money and put it in the race cars. And he said he had a mat guy. And he's, that to me, that shows a loyalty to a good product and a good customer based theory of I've serviced him well, I've designed the stuff well, got him a good quality product, and he really appreciates that and the way that I take care of him. And I will always be loyal to somebody like Jeremy and Jordan 100%. And to see his team get the first win, and you've talked about it quite a bit, Alex. If that ain't the Daytona story, I don't know what is. Right? He started out in Legends cars and worked his all the way up to where he is in Xfinity, and stepped aside to put drivers in his car to give his team a chance at winning. You just can't make that up and just hope to God it works. But Jordan's done it a lot of the steps of the ways, and it was so great to see him win. He actually gave me a hug on the way to Victory Lane. I didn't go in Victory Lane, but it was real cool that he stopped and hugged me and told me thank you. And, it's kind of funny, and knowing what Keith said about the driving and everything, you hit the scans and everything on the radio, and I didn't mean to because I was just putting the radio back in my pocket, but one of the spotters actually said, "Pull your belts tight, boys. The 27's still running up front. We might have more than one green, white caution here." So, but it turned out pretty well, and I could not be happier for any team that I have ever given a mat to that would win a race, and that goes all the way down to the local level. But to see it happen to Jordan after everything he's done and been a loyal customer, it's really, really awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, that pretty much wraps everything up. So I've got one more question for my mom about how the weekend went. How did you like the experience in general? And then was the racing itself better, or was the after party better?
Well, okay, the whole experience, I will have to say, many years sitting in the stands and then coming, like I said, sitting on pit road. I've done that a couple of times, but being able to sit on top of the pit box and watching the race, whole different perspective. It's amazing to watch the cars going around, to see the guys, see the crew chief, doing what they do, looking at the monitors, checking everything. Like your dad said, he doesn't think I pay attention to things, but I do. I see them, weighing the gas cans to see how much gas I got left in them. I, got to hear, and it was really cool to get to hear the spotters talking and the team going back and forth there, and the crew chief yelling at everybody. It was great. So it was a very unique experience. I definitely enjoyed it. And just, it was a great race experience. The after party, it was lots of fun too. We, partied like the old people. It was great. So
yeah, it's a little embarrassing to say this, but my mom has done Talladega Boulevard more so than I have.
I did not go on Talladega.
I know you didn't go on a boulevard, but you've gotten closer than I have.
That's terrifying.
So that's a little bit embarrassing to say. But with that,
I karaoke, but no, I did not go on the boulevard.
Okay. I'm just saying you've gotten closer than I have. So that's shame on me for that one. All right, so that's about all we've got time for tonight. I want to thank my parents for coming on. I want to again express how cool it is that they have built a business in basically 4 or 5 months and already have their name on an Xfinity car for Talladega, and then on the B pillar, I believe, for the rest of the year with Jeremy Clements. So be rooting for the 51 car. If you didn't already know from past podcasts that we may have a little slight bias towards that car. Well, you do now. And Anybody have anything extra to say before we get this one closed down?
Thanks for wanting to share our experience, because it was definitely a great one. I mean, how many other people can say that you get invited after the race to go hang out with the driver that you just put your name on the side of the car?
So we got to get you guys out there is what we need to do. Is our goal is to at some point or my goal, I don't know about your dad's, my goal is to hopefully be a primary sponsor in a car. And so we have to get you guys out there, have some experiences that we've actually
well, there's a lot of us that are kind of in on this project. We're going to have a lot of people in on it.
Yeah, but your mom and Jeremy talked about it, and in 2025 is our goal to have an entire car just for the Matt Man designs.
All right. Well, mark that on your calendar, Keith. We're all going to a race 2025.
And if I'm a primary, I get more people in.
Okay. That sounds good.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. Your
That's
mom
more
gets
money.
more people in than for being the primary sponsor, because she's going to pay the invoice.
Uh-huh.
Right. Well, thanks as always, Keith, for coming on. I really do enjoy coming on here and talking with you, even though you steal all the good words, and I can barely get some in sometimes. But
I got my dictionary over here that you don't see it.
that's what it is.
Love
That's
it.
what it is. That's what it is. I can't compete with your always saying the right thing. Like whatever it is, even if I think that my answer is right, you say the right thing, whether or not I agree with it. And I'm like, damn, how is he so good with words like that?
It's very articulate.
Yeah, very
Much
articulate.
appreciated.
Very, 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 very big diction you've got going on there. So we appreciate that every week. I hope you enjoyed today's Tape Delayed show. We'll see you live next week with Colton after this week's racing. And I believe we have Formula One back. So you'll hear some stuff from around the world next week as well. So other than that, we'll see you next time. All right. Bye.